The road into Oakhaven was a ribbon of asphalt unspooling through a tunnel of skeletal trees, their bare branches clawing at the bruised twilight sky. Years had passed since I last traversed this route. Years thick with a silence I'd cultivated, a distance I'd believed would heal the old wounds. Yet the news of my estranged grandmother's death, cryptic and sudden, had pulled me back, a reluctant anchor dragged through choppy waters. The air, even before the first weathered signpost announced Oakhaven's name, felt different. It was heavy, not with humidity or the familiar tang of pine, but with a peculiar stillness that seemed to absorb all sound. My tires hummed on the asphalt, a lone, insistent note in a symphony of absence. I lowered my window, hoping to catch the scent of the sea, the one constant I remembered from my boyhood summers. Instead, a faint metallic tang, like old pennies left in stagnant water, prickled my nostrils. As the car crested the final hill, the town unfolded beneath me. Oakhaven, a collection of salt-bleached houses huddled against the encroaching forest, lay unnaturally quiescent. No distant laughter, no rumble of engines, no dog's bark echoing across the valley. It was a tableau, painted in shades of charcoal and ash, where even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I drove slowly through the main street, the familiar storefronts now looking like vacant eyesores. The bakery's awning, once a vibrant striped canvas, hung limp and faded. The general store's windows, usually bright with the glow of fluorescent lights, were dark, reflecting only the ghostly street lamps. I saw no children playing, no elderly residents gossiping on porches, no teenagers loitering by the old cinema marquee. Then, a flicker of movement. My foot instinctively eased off the accelerator. I wanted to wave, to offer a smile, but something in her posture, rigid and unyielding, held my hand to the steering wheel. As my car drew level, her head turned with a slow, almost mechanical precision. Her gaze, when it found mine through the windshield, was startling. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, like polished river stones reflecting nothing, betraying no flicker of recognition, no spark of human warmth. There was no curiosity, no surprise, just an empty, boundless expanse. It was not hostile, merely blank. I accelerated, leaving her to her silent, unwavering vigil. Further down, by the old fishing dock, a group of men stood, silhouetted against the dim light spilling from a warehouse door. They were motionless, their forms like statues carved from the night itself. I couldn't discern their faces, but their collective stillness, their absolute lack of interaction, was unsettling. They weren't talking, weren't gesturing. They simply were, rooted to the spot, staring out at the inky expanse. The air grew heavier, pressing in on me. I felt a distinct, prickling sensation on the nape of my neck, the undeniable certainty of unseen eyes following my passage. My internal compass, usually so reliable, began to spin wildly, signaling an unknown, insidious presence. I parked my car near the funeral home, a somber two-story edifice that somehow managed to look even more forlorn than I remembered. The street was deserted. A single gust of wind rattled a loose shutter somewhere down the block, a sudden jarring sound in the profound quiet. I stepped out of the car, the crunch of gravel under my boots sounding unnaturally loud. I needed a moment, a breath of something familiar, something real. I walked to the edge of the bluff, a path I knew well from childhood. Below, the vast black expanse of the ocean stretched endlessly. The mandatory location, the ocean shore at night with stationary waves, was laid out before me, exactly as it had always been. Yet now it felt like a stage set. The waves, usually a restless symphony of crashing and receding foam, barely stirred. The rhythmic, muted ebb and flow was meant to be soothing, a counterpoint to the agitation building within me. But tonight, it only amplified the pervasive sense of wrongness. The ocean was not truly still. It was simply subdued, its immense power held in check by some invisible force. It was as if the world itself had decided to speak in hushed tones, its natural dynamism muted, its very memory altered. This was not the Oakhaven of my childhood, nor was it merely a town faded by time and neglect. This was a place where the air itself felt thin, where silence was a physical weight, and where the few inhabitants moved with the measured, unseeing grace of sleepwalkers. Yet the homecoming was not one of comfort, but of a creeping, insidious estrangement. The skeletal trees gave way to the skeletal town, Oakhaven, where every clapboard house seemed to huddle deeper into its own shadow, and the air itself felt heavy, muted, like a memory half forgotten. The funeral parlor, a squat stone building I remembered as vibrant with stained glass, now presented a facade of dull, opaque panes, reflecting nothing but the bruised sky. Inside, the scent of lilies and old wood varnish clung to the air, thick and cloying. A handful of townsfolk, faces etched with a familiar weariness that felt amplified since my last visit, milled about. Their hushed murmurs seemed to drift, untethered, never quite forming coherent sentences. I found myself scanning faces, searching for the spark of recognition, the warmth of shared history. I spotted the undertaker, his usually jovial face now a mask of quiet solemnity, standing near my grandmother's closed casket. His eyes, when they met mine, held a strange, distant quality. "Cole," he murmured, his voice a dry whisper. "It's been too long." "It has, for everything." I gestured vaguely towards the casket. He deserved a dignified send-off. The undertaker nodded slowly. "Your grandmother was a presence." He paused, his gaze drifting past my shoulder. "A strong woman, always knew her own mind." "She did," I pressed, trying to find a conversational anchor. "Do you remember when she convinced the town council to fund the new library wing? She always said knowledge was the only true defense against—" "I don't recall that specific initiative. He was involved in many civic projects, of course, a tireless advocate for the town." His words were smooth, practiced, but they lacked the specific resonance I expected. It was as if he were reading from a script, recalling facts without the accompanying emotional texture. I moved on, seeking out an old schoolmate, a woman whose laugh I remembered as bright and infectious. Him's smile, when he saw me, was hesitant, a ghost of its former self. "Cole," he breathed, his eyes wide but empty of the familiar light. "It's good to see you," I said, trying to project a normalcy I didn't feel. "I'm so sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. I wish it could have been different, like the old days. Remember that summer when your older brother and I tried to build a raft to sail to the lighthouse?" She tilted her head, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her hand as she clutched a handkerchief. "A raft?" she repeated, a vague puzzlement clouding her features. I don't think I recall that. My brother was always more interested in fishing, I think." A prickle of alarm ran down my spine. Her brother and I had spent weeks on that raft, ending in a spectacular comical failure. It was a core memory of my childhood here, a story my grandmother had loved to recount. But we spent days down by the old mill pond. I insisted, a desperate edge creeping into my tone. "He used to bring us lemonade." Him's smile faltered, replaced by a mild, polite confusion. "I'm sure we had many pleasant days by the pond, Cole. Your grandmother was a very kind woman, always offering refreshments." Her eyes darted away, seeking refuge in the distant wall, as if the conversation itself were an imposition. It wasn't just a lapse. It was a blank space where a vivid memory should have been. And the way she spoke of my grandmother, a generalized benevolence, devoid of the sharp edges and fierce love I remembered. It was as if a filter had been applied, softening, muting, erasing the specifics. I tried another, an older man who used to run the general store, a fount of local gossip and history. "Sir?" I began, my voice strained. "Do you remember when my grandmother found that old Civil War bayonet buried in her garden?" He was so proud of it, claimed it was a sign of Oakhaven's resilience. He nodded gravely, his gaze fixed on some point beyond my shoulder. He was a woman of many interests, always finding things. His eyes, though, were glassy, unseeing. A true Oakhaven native. He offered no further detail, no recollection of the excitement, the town-wide discussion, the article in the local paper. Nothing. Each interaction was a mirror reflecting back a distorted image of my past, a past that felt increasingly alien. Their memories were not merely fractured. They were smoothed over, like stones worn down by an unseen current. All the sharp, unique details erased. They spoke of my grandmother with a uniform, almost rehearsed reverence, but never with the intimate, messy details that make a person real. It was a collective amnesia, a shared inability to grasp the texture of recent history, or even specific personal anecdotes. It was as if Oakhaven itself had forgotten how to truly remember. My head began to ache, a dull throb behind my eyes. Was I remembering things incorrectly? Had my long absence warped my own perceptions? The thought was terrifying, more so than any tangible threat. The twilight had deepened, painting the town in hues of bruised indigo and charcoal. The usual roar of the surf was strangely muted, replaced by a soft, rhythmic lapping, as if the water itself held its breath. It was a tableau of arrested motion, beautiful yet deeply unsettling, mirroring the stillness I'd found in the town's collective mind. I stood there, the cold wind whipping at my hair, trying to make sense of the fractured memories, the polite, empty smiles. My grandmother's death, cryptic as it was, had pulled me back into a town that was no longer itself. And the unsettling truth began to settle. It wasn't just their memories that were fading. The very fabric of Oakhaven, its past, its identity, felt like it was unraveling. And I, caught in its spectral currents, was left to wonder if my own sanity would be the next thing to be quietly, meticulously erased. I would not let Oakhaven forget, nor would I allow myself to be forgotten. The air in my grandmother's house hung thick and quiet, a tapestry woven from dust motes and forgotten scents. Clove, beeswax, the faint metallic tang of old paper. Each breath I took felt like disturbing a decades-long slumber. I moved through the rooms with a hesitant reverence, my footsteps muffled by the worn floral rugs, the silence amplifying the creak of floorboards beneath my weight. My task, a grim inheritance, was to clear it all, to sift through the layers of her existence. In the study, a room dominated by towering dark wood bookshelves, the silence was deepest. Here, he had spent her final years, surrounded by forgotten histories and strange curiosities. I ran my hand over the spines of leather-bound volumes, their titles obscured by dust, feeling the cool, dry skin of their age. I started with her writing desk, a sprawling oak behemoth scarred by ink stains and time. Drawers slid open with a groan, revealing a jumble of dried botanical specimens, tarnished silver thimbles, and letters tied with brittle ribbon. Nothing of consequence, only the mundane detritus of a long life. But beneath a stack of yellowed maps, tucked into a false bottom I discovered by accident, my fingers brushing against an unexpected seam in the wood, I found it. No title, no author. Just the texture of hide and the faint, sweet smell of something preserved. When I opened it, the pages were thick, almost parchment-like, filled with her distinctive, elegant script. But it was not the steady hand I remembered from birthday cards. This was frantic, lines slanting, ink often bleeding, as if written in haste or distress. The earliest entries were mundane enough. Observations on local flora, weather patterns, names of Oakhaven families. But then, the tone shifted. Subtle at first, a creeping unease in the language. "The murmurs begin again," one entry read, followed by a crude, repeating symbol. A swirling vortex, almost like an eye, but with too many spirals. They are not words, but the absence of them. The symbols grew more frequent, etched not just with ink, but sometimes scored into the page itself, leaving ragged indentations. Her handwriting became spidery, almost illegible in places. The forgetting. It spreads like a fog. Not a loss of memory, but a replacement. A smoothing over. I remembered the glazed eyes of the town elder, his vacant smile. Further on, the entries dissolved into fragmented thoughts, desperate warnings. A pressure behind the eyes. Just as it had met the town elder. My grandmother's journal hinted at something ancient. Something that had been here before Oakhaven was even a name on a map. Our family. We were meant to be the keepers, the watchers. To remember what others cannot. The words were scrawled across a 2-page spread, surrounded by more of the swirling symbols, larger now, almost devouring the text. The founding, a pact. This wasn't just a journal. It was a desperate testament, a frantic warning from a woman trying to hold on to something vast and terrifying that was slipping away. Her legacy wasn't just this house. It was this burden, this knowledge. And now it was mine. I needed air, needed distance from the suffocating revelations. I clutched the journal, a desperate anchor in a sea of encroaching unreality, and stumbled out into the night. The moon, a sliver of bone, cast a weak silver sheen across the water. They merely rose and fell, a slow, hypnotic breath, as if the ocean itself was holding its memory, refusing to relinquish it to the land. The sight was unnerving, a perfect, silent mirror to the forgetting described in the journal. I stared at the unmoving expanse, the ledger warm and terrifying against my chest. My grandmother had tried to remember. Now I understood why. The brittle pages of my grandmother's journal lay open, a testament to a truth too vast to hold. A cold dread seeped into my bones, colder than the dust in the air. Her legacy wasn't just this house. It was this burden, this knowledge, and now it was mine. The silence that followed the last word was not empty, but thick, a suffocating blanket woven from forgotten whispers. I sat motionless, the faint scent of dried ink and aged paper clinging to my fingers. It wasn't a word, not yet, but an implication of sound. A breath exhaled from a lung I couldn't locate. My eyes, weary from the journal's revelations, drifted to the periphery of my vision. It was gone before my gaze could sharpen, a trick of tired eyes, a phantom of the mind. A pervasive unease settled over me, a gnawing certainty that I was no longer alone in the quiet confines of the house, despite its apparent emptiness. I needed air, needed distance from the journal's haunting words, from the spectral sounds and the elusive shapes. I rose, the floorboards groaning beneath my weight, echoing the protest in my own bones. Stepping out into the cool evening, the air tasted of salt and damp earth. I walked, compelled by an urge to confirm or deny the creeping suspicion the journal had sown. The shop, a beacon of sorts in the dimming light, drew me in. The bell above the door chimed, a surprisingly cheerful sound that felt jarring against the growing tension within me. The shopkeeper, a man whose face was etched with the weariness of decades spent behind the counter, looked up. His smile was a practiced thing, a familiar mask. "Evening, Cole," he offered, his voice a low murmur. I nodded, my gaze sweeping over the shelves, searching for something, anything, that might anchor me to the world I thought I knew. "Good evening. Tell me, has the old woman who used to knit by the harbor, the one with the bright red scarf, been in lately?" I asked, picturing her vivid presence, her needles clicking like a tiny, persistent clock. The shopkeeper paused, his brow furrowing slightly, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes before it smoothed away. "The old woman with the scarf?" he repeated, his voice devoid of recognition. He rubbed a hand over his chin. "Can't say I recall anyone fitting that description, Cole. Are you sure you're thinking of Oakhaven? There aren't many who knit by the harbor these days." My stomach tightened. I remembered her distinctly. Her laugh, the way she'd always offer me a stick of peppermint. It wasn't a vague memory. He was here, always. She lived in the small cottage near the old lighthouse. He shook his head slowly, a dismissive gesture. "No cottage there, Cole, not for years. Just the lighthouse keeper's place, and he keeps to himself." His words were calm, certain, but they were a denial of my own memory, a slow erasure. It was as if he had never existed, or at least, never existed here. The unacknowledged absence was more terrifying than an explicit disappearance. I left the shop, the chime of the bell a mocking echo of my internal discord. I found myself walking towards the familiar pull of the water, the rhythmic sigh of the ocean usually a comfort. The vast expanse of water lay still, almost glassy, reflecting the bruised violet of the sky. The waves, which should have been crashing, churning, creating the familiar white noise of the sea, were frozen in place, like colossal petrified sculptures of water. They weren't merely sounds anymore. They were fragments of thought, echoes of forgotten names, snippets of conversations I could almost grasp. Gone, lost, never was. The words were like shards of glass, piercing the fabric of my sanity. It did not move with the fluidity of a living thing, but rather expanded, a blot of deeper night against the already profound gloom, stretching towards me like an unfolding silent hunger. My breath hitched. This was not a trick of the light, nor the product of a weary mind. This was real, tangible in its terrifying presence. The entity wasn't just influencing Oakhaven, it was claiming it, devouring its very essence, and the process was accelerating. The shopkeeper's casual erasure of my grandmother's home, a place as real as the blood in my veins, solidified a cold resolve within me. It wasn't merely forgetfulness. It was an active, chilling denial. A whisper of a greater sickness infecting Oakhaven's collective mind. My grandmother's journal, clutched tight, felt less like paper and more like a shard of truth in a town drowning in oblivion. Its brittle pages, bearing a faded sketch of an ornate, almost predatory symbol, pointed to one place, the old mill. The journey to the outskirts was a descent into deepening twilight. Oakhaven, usually a beacon of scattered lights, seemed to shrink, pulling its warmth inward, leaving the periphery to the encroaching gloom. The road, once familiar, felt longer, the trees on either side denser, their branches skeletal fingers against a bruised sky. My breath plumed in the crisp air, a fleeting ghost. The silence was not peaceful. It was a hungry quiet, waiting. The waves, caught mid-crest, appeared frozen, their white caps like arrested foam, a grotesque tableau of perpetual motion halted. No ebb, no flow, just a vast, silent weight pressing against the land. It was wrong, fundamentally, terrifyingly wrong, a disruption of nature's ancient rhythm. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of brine and decay, hinting at things long submerged. The mill emerged from the gloom like a skeletal beast, its broken windows vacant eyes staring out at the frozen sea. Rust-eaten corrugated iron clung precariously to its timber frame, groaning under the unseen pressure of years. This wasn't just an abandoned factory. It was a monument to forgotten industry, a husk of purpose. The air around it felt stagnant, heavy with the dust of generations and the lingering echo of absent machinery. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, mildew, and the metallic tang of old rust. Dust motes danced in the light, a swirling galaxy of forgotten particles. Towering machinery, draped in cobwebs like ancient shrouds, loomed in the periphery, their gears locked, their belts slack. The floorboards groaned beneath my weight, complaining with a weary sigh. I moved slowly, methodically, my flashlight beam sweeping across the vast, cavernous space. My grandmother's journal, open to the page with the drawing, guided my search. My light eventually caught on a section of wall, partially obscured by a toppled hoist. It was rough-hewn stone, unlike the newer brickwork of the main structure. As I drew closer, scraping away layers of grime and clinging moss with my bare hands, the unmistakable outline began to emerge. There it was, etched deeply into the cold stone. The exact symbol from the journal, larger, more imposing, its lines sharper, imbued with a silent, ancient power. I studied the carving, its geometry unsettling in its precision. The spiral seemed to draw the eye inward, promising an endless descent. As my gaze followed its curves, I noticed a subtle distortion in the stone around it, a slight indentation that didn't quite match the rough texture of the wall. It was too regular, too intentional. I pressed against it, then pushed harder, feeling a slight give. With a grunt of effort, I shoved aside the heavy hoist, revealing a section of the wall that wasn't stone at all, but a cleverly disguised panel. This was it, the root of it all, the path my grandmother had sought, the place where Oakhaven's memories went to die. I took a breath, steeling myself, and stepped onto the first ancient stair. The cold resolve forged by the shopkeeper's casual dismissal of my grandmother's home still hummed like a taut wire within me, a grim counterpoint to the rustle of her journal clutched in my hand. Her cryptic notes had led me here, to this jagged maw in the earth, hidden where the land surrendered to the sea. The air, thick with the scent of salt and decay, clung to me. A narrow, irregular opening, half obscured by a tumble of seaweed-slicked rocks, beckoned. My small lamp cast a nervous circle of light into the gloom, revealing rough-hewn rock, glistening with perpetual dampness. I took a deep breath, the taste of brine and something else, metallic and primal, filling my mouth, and stepped into the black. The passage immediately narrowed, pressing in on me, the rock face brushing against my shoulders. My lamp beam danced, illuminating walls that seemed to shift, their surfaces a tapestry of moss, lichen, and something else, a slick, almost oily sheen that caught the light with an unsettling luminescence. The tunnels twisted and turned, a labyrinthine embrace, disorienting me with every step. I lost all sense of direction, swallowed by the earth's vast, silent maw. A low, persistent hum began to vibrate through the soles of my boots, a deep, resonant thrum that seemed to emanate from the very stone around me. It was too subtle to be a sound, more a sensation, a tremor in the marrow of my bones. I saw them then, etched into the rough rock walls, crude, swirling symbols, barely visible under layers of mineral deposit. They were unlike any script I'd ever seen, primal and unsettling, suggesting an artistry born of desperation or devotion. Further on, the passage widened into a small, irregular chamber. Here, the hum intensified, vibrating through the air itself, a faint, disquieting melody. My lamp beam swept across the floor, revealing a scattering of bones. They were old, brittle, and silent, yet their presence spoke volumes of ancient rites performed in this lightless space. The tunnels continued their downward spiral, each twist deepening the sense of entrapment. Then I emerged into a cavern. The hum here was no longer a vibration, but a low, guttural drone, filling the space, resonating in my teeth. And then I saw it. In the center of the cavern, rooted to the very bedrock, rose a colossal organic growth. It pulsed, not rhythmically, but with an erratic, sickening throb, like an engorged heart struggling in a dying body. Its surface was a mottled, glistening gray, crisscrossed with veins that glowed with a faint, sickly green light, a bioluminescence that illuminated the cavern just enough to reveal its horrifying scale. Tendrils, thick as my arm, writhed sluggishly from its mass, burrowing back into the rock like parasitic roots. A viscous amber fluid wept from minute fissures in its surface, collecting in shallow depressions around its base, reflecting the ghastly green glow. This was no mere rock formation, no ancient fungus. This was alive, profoundly and monstrously so. It was the physical manifestation, the undeniable proof. I could feel its presence, not just visually or audibly, but as a psychic pressure, an emptiness that seemed to siphon the very air from my lungs, the memories from my mind. The entity was real. It was here, and it was feeding. It was as if the very pulse of the world had been quelled. The air grew thick, muffling the distant natural sounds of the night, replacing them with a profound, resonant quiet. Each step I took on the gritty floor echoed unnervingly, a solitary intrusion into a sacred, hushed space. The passage sloped downward, winding deeper into the earth's belly. The walls here were not merely rock. They seemed to pulse with a faint internal luminescence, a ghostly green that was barely perceptible, like light seen through heavy water. A tapestry of low, murmuring voices, like 1,000 dry leaves skittering across a parched ground. I extinguished my flashlight, preferring the uncertain ambient glow to the stark betrayal of my beam. The cavern opened into a vast, vaulted chamber, its ceiling lost to the heights, its expanse rimmed by the same unsettling green light. And there, in the center, they were. A congregation. They stood in a loose circle, perhaps 30 or 40 figures, their backs mostly to me. The fisherman, his weathered face usually creased with the worry of the tides, stood slack-jawed, his eyes wide and vacant, reflecting only the dim green light. Beside him, the shopkeeper, her usually stern demeanor replaced by an unsettling placidity, her hands clasped loosely before her. I recognized others. The elder who tended the lighthouse, the young dock worker, even the quiet librarian. All of them motionless, their gazes unfixed, their bodies swaying imperceptibly, like kelp in a gentle current. From them, from the very air around them, emanated the murmurs. It wasn't speech, not truly. They were memories, raw and unbidden, not my own, yet I felt their resonance, their emotional weight. They weren't merely standing, they were feeding it. Their vacant eyes, their placid expressions. They weren't in a trance, not quite. They were being emptied. They were becoming part of a vast, silent consciousness, their individual light slowly dimming, dissolving into a singular, immense presence that resonated beneath Oakhaven. And then, the pull. A warmth spread through my chest, an insidious invitation to release the burden of self, to shed the weight of individual memory and join the tranquil flow. It promised peace, an end to the struggle, emerging into something vast and timeless, where pain and doubt simply ceased to exist. My own memories, my fears, my grandmother's cryptic words. They felt suddenly heavy, cumbersome. My hand tightened around the journal, its worn leather a small, rough anchor in the rising tide of sensation. No. My grandmother had fought this. He had documented it. This wasn't peace. It was erasure. The murmurs grew louder, more insistent, no longer just fragmented memories, but a direct plea. A siren song to abandon the solitary island of my mind and drift into the collective ocean. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to open them and let the green light wash over me, to join the silent, swaying congregation in their slow, terrible surrender. The journal in my hand, my grandmother's last defiant whisper, felt impossibly heavy, a shield against an invisible tide. I stood at the precipice, the ground beneath my boots vibrating with a low, resonant thrum, a sound that bypassed my ears and reverberated directly within my skull. It was a hum of immense silent power, a chorus of forgotten voices. The pull intensified, a subtle, insidious suction. It wasn't a physical force, not a gust of wind or a grasping hand, but a deep, resonant invitation, a siren song for the mind. I saw them, but they felt distant, not truly mine. It was as if a vast unseen loom was unpicking the threads of my identity, preparing to weave them into a larger, uniform tapestry. This was it. This was the collective, the silent consciousness my grandmother had warned against. It didn't want my body. It wanted the essence of me. It wanted my unique history, my individual consciousness, to fold into its own boundless, featureless expanse. The sensation was not of pain, but of a terrifying, gentle erasure, a smooth, frictionless assimilation. My voice sounded thin, alien. I clamped my eyes shut, a futile attempt to halt the internal dissolution, and staggered backward, away from the maw. The hum intensified, a silent roar trying to drown out the last vestiges of my individual thought. She hadn't been afraid of dying. He had been afraid of forgetting herself. I stumbled, scrambling on hands and knees, clawing at the damp soil. Each inch I gained away from the opening was a victory against an invisible current. My lungs burned, air rasping in my throat, but the struggle was less physical and more a desperate internal war. These were the things the entity sought to claim. It was the obliteration of the I. Finally, with a guttural cry that tore from my chest, I broke free, tumbling backward down a gentle incline, away from the pulsating heart of the underground network. I lay there, gasping, the taste of dirt and fear thick on my tongue. I was still Cole. I was still me. But the near loss had etched itself onto my soul, a scar deeper than any wound. The full, horrifying scope of the entity's power now lay bare before me. It wasn't about violence or blood, not about killing in the conventional sense. It was about absorption, a creeping tide of sameness that swallowed individual consciousness whole, leaving behind only a vast, unified echo. Oakhaven wasn't dying. It was being meticulously, painstakingly unmade, its residents becoming threads in a colossal, silent tapestry, their memories and identities woven into the entity's own. My grandmother hadn't been murdered. He had been erased. And the townsfolk, with their fractured memories and unsettling uniformity, were merely stages in this insidious process. I pushed myself up, my legs still unsteady, and began to walk. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed distance, open air, a place where the entity's hum couldn't reach me. Every face I saw could be another lost soul, every house a testament to what had been taken. The air was cool, carrying the sharp, briny scent of salt and decaying seaweed, a potent anchor to the physical world. I sank onto a weathered piece of driftwood, the rough grain digging into my palms, and pulled out my grandmother's journal. He had known, he had fought, and in her cryptic notes, in her desperate research, there had to be an answer. My fingers traced the elegant, determined loops of her script. Her entries spoke of resonance, of frequency, of disruptors, and severance. She wrote of ancient rituals, of the land's own memory, of a way to create a counter-frequency, a dissonant chord that could shatter the entity's hold. It wasn't about destroying the entity. How could one destroy a consciousness? But about severing its connection to Oakhaven, breaking the threads that bound the town's collective memory to its vast, hungry awareness. A desperate, fragile plan began to form in my mind, coalescing from the scattered fragments of her research and my own terrifying experience. If the entity fed on collective memory, if it assimilated identity, then the only way to fight it was to reassert individuality, to introduce chaos into its perfect silent order. It was insane, a gamble against an ancient, unknowable force, but it was the only path left. I would sever its connection. I would bring Oakhaven back. Or I would be erased trying. The sea, usually a restless beast, lay unnaturally placid, its surface like polished obsidian reflecting the skeletal moon, each wave frozen mid-crest, holding its breath in an impossible tableau. My grandmother's hurried script spoke of a great forgetting, a deep hunger that consumed not flesh, but the very texture of existence. It spoke, too, of a resonance, a way to stir the dormant currents, to remind the forgotten of their own names, their own stories. My first attempt was clumsy, born of desperation. I found the old fisherman by the derelict docks, his gaze fixed on the unnatural stillness of the harbor, his gnarled hands meticulously coiling a rope that had no purpose. His face, once a roadmap of weathered smiles and hard-won wisdom, was now smooth, an uncreased mask of placid indifference. "There was a storm last autumn," I began, my voice a tentative tremor against the vast quiet. "Remember? The one that tore the roof off the old cannery? You helped my grandfather patch it, spent 3 days up there swapping stories about the war." His eyes, the color of faded sea glass, shifted to me, but there was no recognition, no flicker of memory. He was too far gone, or perhaps I was approaching it all wrong. I retreated, the weight of the journal a constant pressure against my ribs. I found refuge in the skeletal remains of an abandoned factory, its rusted metal bones groaning faintly in the wind, a sound that, at least, was real. Under the pallid glow of my phone, I scoured the journal again, my fingers tracing the frantic lines, searching for a pattern, a specific instruction. To awaken, to disrupt, requires a chorus of echoes, a touchstone of shared sorrow, a vessel of collective joy. The old bell, the one that tolled for every birth and every passing, holds the resonance. The old bell. It hung in the belfry of the town's dilapidated church, silent for years, its rope long since rotted away. It made a horrifying kind of sense. The entity consumed memory, and the bell was a repository of communal remembrance, each chime marking a moment in the town's collective consciousness. To ring it, to force the sound of shared history back into the air, might be the only way to sever the entity's hold, even if only for a moment. But it wouldn't be enough for me to ring it alone. I needed others. I thought of the elder, whose hands had once carved intricate figures from driftwood, each one telling a story. I thought of the baker, whose bread had tasted of childhood and warmth. I needed to find the ones whose memories, however faint, might still be tethered to these communal anchors. With renewed purpose, a determined knot tightening in my stomach, I ventured back into the hushed streets. It was watching. It knew my intent. I found the baker by his shop, sweeping phantom crumbs from a pristine, empty floor. His movements were fluid, mechanical, his eyes holding the same distant placidity as the fisherman's. "Your grandmother," I said, my voice firmer this time, trying to pierce the veil. "She loved your rye bread. Said it reminded her of her own mother's kitchen. Remember the time she brought you that old family recipe for sourdough starter? The one that smelled faintly of apples?" A flicker, a minuscule tremor in the baker's hand, a ghost of a hesitation in his rhythmic sweep. His eyes, for a fleeting instant, seemed to deepen, to hold a glimmer of something beyond the placid surface. It was gone as quickly as it came, leaving behind only the blankness. But it had been there. A fragment. "The church bell," I pressed, emboldened. "It used to ring for every new batch of bread you pulled from the oven, didn't it? A celebration. A reminder to come and get it fresh." This time, the baker paused completely. His gaze, though still distant, seemed to fix on an unseen point beyond me, perhaps toward the church steeple itself. He didn't speak, didn't respond, but the cessation of his movement, the slight shift in his posture, was a monumental victory. A profound stillness descended, even deeper than before, as if the very molecules of the town were holding their breath. From the periphery of my vision, I sensed movement. The few townsfolk I could see on the street, the librarian, the postman, the old dock worker, had all stopped. Their heads in unison slowly turned. Their gazes, devoid of individual thought, converged on me, on the baker, on the tiny, fleeting spark of remembrance I had tried to ignite. I had touched a nerve. I had disturbed the stillness. The entity was aware, and it was tightening its grip. The baker, as if reeled back by an invisible string, resumed his sweeping, his face once again a perfect, unlined mask. The moment was gone. But I had seen the flicker. I had felt the resistance. I had a path, a desperate plan, and a few scattered fragments of hope. But the entity was vast, ancient, and immensely powerful. The true battle for Oakhaven, for its very soul, was about to begin, and I was alone against a silent, remembering tide. The baker's distant gaze, fixed on the unseen beyond me, was a fracture, a moment where the seamless fabric of Oakhaven's quiet uniformity tore. It was a sign, undeniable and chilling, that the veil was thinning, the illusion faltering. The subtle shift in his placid features, that almost frown, was a whisper of defiance from a mind nearly consumed, a silent plea for release. It was also a beacon, drawing me deeper into the town's silent, suffocating heart. I felt it then, a thrumming beneath my feet, a low, resonant hum that vibrated not just through the cobblestones, but through the very marrow of my bones. It was a call, a silent, insistent summons. My grandmother's cryptic death, the townsfolk's vacant eyes, the creeping sense of wrongness, all converged into this single, overwhelming pull. The source was not in the church steeple, nor the old mill, but far, far beneath them all. I moved, propelled by a will that felt both my own and something older, more desperate. The familiar streets blurred into a tunnel of muted colors and hushed presences. The few townsfolk I passed seemed not to notice me, their eyes like polished stones, their movements slow, deliberate, as if wading through unseen currents. Their very stillness was a weight pressing down, amplifying the thrumming beneath the earth. It was not a cave, not a mine shaft, but a tear in the very fabric of the land, as if the ground itself had simply given way under an unbearable pressure from below. I descended into the maw. The air grew heavy, damp, tasting of loam and something indescribably vast. The light, what little there was, bled away, swallowed by the deepening gloom. I could feel the presence now, not just a hum, but a slow, rhythmic pulse, like a leviathan's slumbering heart. It grew stronger with every step, vibrating against my teeth, through my skull, until it was less a sound and more a state of being. The passage opened into a cavern, immense and black, but not entirely without light. Before me, sprawling across the cavern floor, filling it with its terrible presence, was the entity. It was not flesh, not rock, but something in between, a living landscape of shifting contours and ethereal glow. Tendrils of faint, phosphorescent light pulsed within its depths, like blood vessels in a colossal alien organ. And within it, around it, through it, I saw them, the fragmented memories of generations. They were not images, not distinct scenes, but impressions, fleeting echoes of lives lived. A child's laughter, a mother's lullaby, the scent of wood smoke on a winter evening, the feel of rough hands on a plow, the taste of salt on a fisherman's tongue. They flickered, merged, dissolved, a kaleidoscope of Oakhaven's past, all consumed, all assimilated into this single silent consciousness. The entity was not merely feeding on memory, it was memory, made manifest and terrible. A sudden, overwhelming wave of sensation crashed over me. It was not a physical impact, but a psychic one, a deluge of borrowed lives, of other selves. I saw through the eyes of the baker, felt the rhythmic kneading of dough, the warmth of the oven, the sweet scent of rising bread. I was everyone, no one. This was the struggle. Not with fists or blades, but with will, with the very essence of self. It projected memories, not as a weapon, but as an invitation, a gentle, insidious erosion of my boundaries. The moonlight painted the water in silver and black, the waves frozen in their crests, never breaking, never receding. It was beautiful, serene, utterly devoid of life or change. This vision, so tranquil and yet so profoundly wrong, was a fragment of someone else's peace, a memory of stillness offered as a lure. It was the entity's ultimate promise, an end to all struggle, all pain, all separate existence. But I clung to myself. I pushed back, a desperate, silent scream against the encroaching tide. My mind felt stretched, thin, on the verge of snapping. The light and shadow of the entity intensified, swirling, churning, as if my resistance was a disturbance in its placid depths. My head throbbed, a relentless drumbeat against my skull. The collective memories pressed in, a cacophony of quiet lives, threatening to overwhelm my own fragile narrative. I had to disrupt it, to break its hold, to sever the ties that bound Oakhaven to this devourer of self. With a raw, visceral surge of will, I focused my entire being, not on destruction, but on dissonance. I would not join its harmony. I would introduce a discordant note, a shriek in its silent symphony. I tried to project my own identity, my own unique, messy, singular existence into its vast, consuming heart. It was a desperate gamble, risking my mind for the chance to reclaim a town. The pressure in my head became unbearable, a universe imploding inward. Moonlight, cold and unblinking, cast the unmoving water in shades of obsidian and quicksilver. The crests, frozen in their eternal ascent, seemed to hold their breath, a silent testament to a world where time had ceased its flow. This was the entity's dream, I understood now, its final desired state, an infinite, unbroken moment, devoid of the messy, unpredictable churn of individual memory. It was the ultimate peace, the perfect oblivion. And in that terrifying tranquility, I felt my own memories, once a raging torrent, begin to slow, to solidify, to become part of the vast, unchanging expanse. My grandmother's face, the warmth of her hand, the sting of her estrangement, all were becoming smooth, polished stones on that silent shore. But the horror wasn't in the stillness itself. It was in the acceptance of it. A deep, insidious comfort began to seep into my bones, a promise of eternal rest from the burden of remembering, of feeling, of being. I was almost there, almost dissolved into the collective, a single ripple among the frozen multitude. Then, a flicker, a sharp, visceral rebellion against the quiet. It was the memory of a summer storm, violent and beautiful, ripping through the Oakhaven pines, the scent of wet earth and bruised needles. It was the thrill of the unpredictable, the chaos of life, the glorious, terrifying rush of change. This entity, this devourer of individual thought, craved only stagnation. But I was a creature of flux, of tides and tempests. I needed the breaking waves, the shifting sands, the relentless, beautiful churn of existence. With a defiant internal roar that found no sound, I seized that storm memory. I clung to it, not as a static image, but as a force. I willed it to break, to crash, to tear at the perfect silvered surface of that phantom ocean. It was a desperate, primal act of resistance, an assertion of my singular, messy, human mind against the encroaching uniformity. I focused all my being on the disruption, on the necessity of change, of decay, of birth and death, the very things the entity sought to erase. My vision of the stationary waves shimmered, fractured. A hairline crack appeared across the moonlit water, then another, spreading like frost across a window pane. The silvered surface groaned, a soundless scream that resonated deep within my marrow. Then, an abrupt, violent expulsion. I gasped, sucking in air that tasted of damp earth and pine, not salt and moon dust. A distant dog barked, sharp and insistent. A crow cawed, harsh and real. I was back, fully, terribly present. My head throbbed, a dull ache behind my eyes. My body felt like a vessel that had been stretched to its breaking point, then snapped back into shape, leaving phantom pains. I pushed myself up from the dusty floorboards, my limbs heavy, trembling. I stumbled out onto the porch. The air was crisp, the sky a vast, indifferent blue. But Oakhaven itself was broken. The townsfolk milled about, not with their previous uniform, placid expressions, but with a bewildered, almost frantic energy. Their movements were disjointed, their gazes darting. He loved these sugar cookies. But who is he? Her face was a mask of profound confusion, a deep furrow etched between her brows. Her hands trembled as she clutched the picture, as if trying to squeeze meaning from the faded image. Further down the street, the grocer was arguing with a colleague, his voice rising in an unfamiliar, frantic pitch. The inventory. It's all wrong. Where are the autumn apples? And the winter squash? It was just summer, wasn't it? Or was it spring? His eyes were wide, unmoored, searching for a foundation that wasn't there. The colleague merely stared at him, a similar bewilderment clouding her own features. I watched, my gut twisting as the pieces fell into place. The entity was disrupted. Its silent, cohesive consciousness had shattered. But the memories it had consumed, the identities it had absorbed, weren't simply returning. They were shrapnel, fragments of a shattered mirror, some sharp and clear, others dulled, many lost forever in the sudden violent rupture. The silence was broken, yes, but what remained was a different kind of quiet. The silence of profound loss, of gaping holes in the fabric of their minds. A man, the carpenter, wandered out of his workshop holding a half-finished birdhouse. He looked at it, then at his calloused hands, then at the sky, a profound sadness settling over his face. "I made this," he murmured, his voice cracking. "I think. But for whom?" His gaze drifted over the familiar landscape of Oakhaven, as if seeing it for the first time, or perhaps for the last. Oakhaven was no longer a silent, unified consciousness, but a collection of traumatized individuals, each grappling with their own personal aftermath, their own internal echoes. The threat of total erasure had receded, but in its place was a widespread, profound scarring. The victory was mine, or ours, but the cost was devastating. I stood there, on the porch of my ancestral home, the scent of pine and bruised earth filling my lungs. The choice loomed before me, stark and heavy. I could leave Oakhaven, walk away from the broken minds, the fragmented memories, the pervasive, quiet grief that now settled over the town like a shroud. I could seek a life unburdened by this trauma, leaving the scarred inhabitants to rebuild what they could, alone. Or I could stay. I could stay and become one of the hands that helped piece together the shards, a steady voice in the cacophony of confusion. The town was broken, but it was my town. And in its shattered state, it finally, truly felt real.